Hello, everybody, and welcome to this conversation with Refugee Protection International. I have a guest with me today. I have Jennifer Hill, who is the founder and executive director of Refugee Protection International. She is joining us from Belmont, Massachusetts. And hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Hi, Veena. Very good. Thank you.
So before Jennifer begins her presentation, just a reminder to all of our members, both I am working from home, Jennifer's working from home too during this time of COVID, and we are subject to the internets of our home and our neighborhoods. So please bear with us if you have any frozen frames or some problem with hearing us. But why don't we go ahead and start? Jennifer, share with us some stories about Refugee Protection International.
Thank you so much, Veena. It's truly a pleasure to be speaking with you. So we are Refugee Protection International, a humanitarian charity. We improve refugee access to education, healthcare, documentation, and self-reliance in Syria, Lebanon, and Turkey. We work with experienced refugee-led implementing partners on the ground. We are so honored that Dining for Women is joining RPI to brighten the future of refugee girls. A record 79.5 million people are forcibly displaced worldwide. Many have gone from dignified lives as doctors and teachers to feeling forgotten and dependent on handouts. Our model restores dignity by empowering refugees who serve each other. We collaborate with remarkable refugee-led organizations on the front lines of conflict. Together, we make humanitarian aid a more shared and rights-based reality. I am excited to share the education and civil documentation program that your generosity will make possible for Syrian girls in Lebanon. Our leading local partners on this project are multi-aid programs and the Union of Relief and Development Associations. The 9-year civil war in Syria has been horrific. As you can see, Syria is in the green map on the right, and over 13 million civilians have fled within and across the borders. We have supported the red areas on this green map on the right with our local partners on the ground. On the map on the left, you will see that the 3 schools that Dining for Women will support are the most northern orange dots near the border with Syria. According to the United Nations, 73% of refugees globally are hosted by countries neighboring those in conflict. Many are overwhelmed. The Global Compact on Refugees urges more support for such frontline countries. This is why we love Dining for Women's focus on extreme poverty. With your support, we will serve the most remote refugees along the Syrian border in Lebanon. Young Syrian children are less likely to be in school here than almost anywhere else in the country. The challenges in these informal tented settlements are enormous. Mothers struggle to lead. Over a quarter of the families here. On average, they earn just $1.63 for a family of 5. What we see is that access to private sector work is formally restricted to agriculture, cleaning, and construction, and work in this mountainous region is very sparse and often involves quarry cutting. Commuting for work is impossible for these women who can't pay the bus or access residency documents. Security checkpoints are a constant in Airsaw, and the COVID-19 lockdown reduced mobility further. In our refugee-led project, Syrian women will teach Syrian girls non-formal primary education, providing some income and a great deal of hope. Yet empowerment is about more than having locals on payroll. It is about having them lead their own organizations and recognizing their invaluable role. In Syria, it was local relief organizations that pulled a 12-year-old from the rubble of an air raid. They taught this child to talk and smile again after losing his entire family. Just across the border, it was Syrian neurosurgeon Dr. Fadi, pictured here, who launched what has become multi-aid programs. Over the years, we have supported MAPS to nimbly educate 3,000 refugee children at 9 centers in Lebanon, thanks to American Securities Foundation and now Dining for Women. In my years working overseas, I have come across few other nonprofits with such trust and pride among their community, not to mention cost efficiency. We were thrilled by the grand bargain signed at the First World Humanitarian Summit in 2016. The international community pledged to increase global funding for grassroots actors from 2 to 25% by 2020. Yet the vast majority of global funding for Syrian refugee programs in Lebanon last year went to the UN and large international organizations. moving toward a refugee-led grassroots response that complements the invaluable work of the UN is about more than access and efficiency. It is about equity. In his latest book, Ford Foundation's president encourages all of us to give the people we serve a seat at the table. Over the years, we have facilitated refugee voice by having our grassroots partners lead on the ground. We support them with project design, funding, grant writing, reporting, and more. Through this collaboration, we move beyond filling gaps. Our projects build capacity, inclusiveness, and access to host country services. Despite Lebanon's promising plan to reach all children with education and the second shifts added to many schools, municipalities vary in their admission practice, implementation, and capacity. We have seen that Syrians born in Lebanon without proper birth registration documentation can find it difficult to access public services, including education. In our province, 82% of applicable refugees have not registered their births with the Foreigners Registry due to lack of information, mobility, and funds. We are delighted that your support will expand a project we designed with our local partner, IRTA. The project will equip single mothers and expecting Syrian women with information and counseling on birth registration. It will also accompany and pay for the birth registration fees of the most vulnerable girls. Our program with Dining for Women will also ensure that primary education is delivered by our partner in a language accessible to refugees. Refugees will receive intensive English language training and the academics needed to access Lebanese secondary school. We believe in the potential of all children. That is why we will mobilize parents and train refugee staff on the value and means of inclusive education. A striking 56% of Syrian children with disabilities are out of school ages 6 to 14, compared to 32% of those without. So we will also encourage communities to continue girls' education beyond primary school and delay marriage. According to the United Nations, 28% of Syrian girls ages 15 to 24 cited marriage as their main reason for being out of school. Years of miseducation perpetuates extreme poverty. This is a fate that every mother fears for her child. And thank you for helping these women to forge a brighter future for their daughters, a future that we can all be proud of. Thank you, Dina.
Jennifer, thank you so much. This must not be easy to be working in these populations. They have so many needs. I know you've been working with these populations for so many years. Tell us about the founding of Refugee Protection International.
I'd love to. So before I founded Refugee Protection International together with our board in late 2015, I used to work overseas in several countries with the United Nations Migration Agency and the Danish Refugee Council. So in Sudan, what I noticed is that when I would attend the UN humanitarian country team meetings, we were all internationals at the table. There was not a single Sudanese there to discuss the crisis in Darfur and how to address it. And I felt that this had to change, because here I was, a young American, doing something that I felt we should do together with the Sudanese. I also noticed, and that actually did prompt us to look at how we could work together with grassroots partners and empower and support them to get more visibility and access to funding and support with grant writing. But also while I was in Sudan, I noticed that humanitarian issues could be more integrated into our humanitarian work. So at the time, we were told, all of us humanitarians, that we had to tread carefully. We had to be careful not to always bring up advocacy or human rights issues, because we didn't want to see our visas retracted and the organizations could then not serve the people in need. And so the idea was always access first to the people in need, and then if we were able to do some human rights work. So now I see that there is an urgency to integrate human rights work with humanitarian aid. It's important. It's often the most important issue for the people that we serve.
Absolutely.
And thank you.
Yeah. Dining for Women really values working with grassroots organizations that give the local people, the power to change their lives and their leadership opportunities, because they know best what it is that they need. So specific to Lebanon or even the other countries that you have worked in, what are you seeing as the long-term futures for all the refugee populations you've been working with?
Absolutely. We find the long-term futures to be difficult without this project with Dining for Women and other similar projects. For example, the refugees who are living in Turkey and Lebanon, they do not have formal refugee status. And there is about 1 million of them in Lebanon and 3.6 million in Turkey. So this is an enormous amount of people who really need a more durable future. And the channels for resettlement to third countries, whether it's the United States or Europe, are very limited. And they're also very difficult to go through, but limited in number. So what does this mean? This means that people on the ground, they need access to self-reliance and documentation. And so we are thrilled Dining for Women is going to support this project, because not only are we giving access to the Lebanese primary school curriculum in the Arabic language and supporting them to be able to take entrance exams for the Lebanese secondary schools, but we're also supporting these women and children to get birth registration documents that they need if they're going to be able to successfully access public services all the time. Because administrations and municipalities can vary in how this is implemented on the ground. And if you are a single mother in Airsol and you want to be able to travel and to register the birth of your child if she was born in another hospital somewhere else in Lebanon, it's going to be very difficult, because not only will it take 2 months of your earnings to be able to pay for the registration fees, but you may not have a valid residency status, in which case you cannot go through the checkpoints to be able to do that. So thank you for making this possible for these women.
Oh my. So tell us, flesh out a little bit more what these documentations, which seem so basic, is changing the lives of the women and girls in the communities that you're working in. Because not only are they dealing with trauma, there are language issues, sometimes there are cultural issues, they're in a different country, and they have to think about their long-term futures.
Absolutely. So almost everywhere that we have traveled, we have had mothers coming to us saying, I know that my future may not be wonderful, but I want my daughter's future to be different, please. And so when I visited Turkey in early 2016, a woman came to me with her family, and we were looking at supporting temporary housing for them. And she said, in addition to the housing subsidies, can you please look at documentation? My 8-year-old daughter has severe asthma, and I cannot buy her an inhaler because she does not have temporary protection status. This was just heartbreaking. Thankfully, she had a grandmother who had status and she could use that, but that's not a safe solution or a durable one. Elsewhere in Turkey, just this past year, we came across 23 Syrian single mothers with children who were just about to be evicted from an apartment block in Antakya, and because they couldn't pay the rent anymore. And so, we said, how can we complement temporary housing subsidies with some sort of more durable support? So we looked at training them in livelihoods that they could do from home because of the COVID-19 lockdown. And not only are they selling some of their soap on the local market now that they learned how to produce with our support, but they also are making it possible for our partner to distribute this to 5,000 Syrian refugees to help protect against COVID-19.
Absolutely. So clearly, Dining for Women's project is like a stepping stone for a whole lot of these refugees, for them to get their education, move on to school, and move on to bigger and better things.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, this is my last question for you. Generally speaking, in the Lebanese context that this project is in, are you sensing that there is a good scope for integration for Syrian refugees? After all, they're neighboring countries. Or is there some tensions? What can you say?
Yes, I would say, okay, good. I would say that in general, a lot of the communities that we have visited on the ground, the host communities are incredibly generous. We've seen locals in Turkey sharing their furniture with Syrian refugees. We've seen in Lebanon that they're opening space for temporary settlements by the refugees. But of course, as the years go on, there's this expectation that, okay, hopefully the refugees will be in a position to return, and that the conditions on the ground in Syria will be conducive to a free and voluntary and informed return. We have yet to see those conditions today. So that means that the refugees are still there. COVID-19, we have heard, is making it a little bit more difficult. People are afraid of the virus spreading. And as we know, these tented temporary settlements, the refugees live in very crowded, overcrowded conditions, essentially, with poor access to running water and sanitation. And so that can make both the refugees and host communities a little bit fearful of the health prospects as well, but also the socioeconomic impact, because daily wages are just going down. Even before the war, these even before COVID-19, these single mothers were earning just $49 a month. And then now you see that it's harder for them to get a daily wage because of COVID-19 as well. And that puts pressure on everyone. But we're hopeful. We're very hopeful. And this project is just a wonderful stepping stone, as you said. So we could not be more grateful to your entire membership. Please thank them for me.
Yes, well, they are watching the video, and they will be delighted to hear what difference our funding is making to these populations. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us today. The problems are immense. The challenges are there for these populations, but it is our privilege to partner with you, and we are delighted to partner with you, and we wish you the very best. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you as well, Vina. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Wonderful.